side. What's
So
up?
it's like an official thing.
And look at Dr. Tony. Hey, Miss Davenport. I miss your life. How are you?
Let me see who hey Jasmine. Hey Valencia. Once lots of people start joining, I can't see everybody. So, sorry about that, y'all.
Danila. Hey, Mama.
Hey, Miss Chambers.
I can't see all these people.
I know. Okay, so in like for maybe a minute, we'll give folks a little bit more time to roll through, and then we're gonna get popping because we have quite a bit to cover.
Yeah, we got a lot. And I'm gonna say up front, I am not Iyanla. So I come with, a little bit of learning and some life experience, but I'm not, gonna be trying to change a whole people's lives. Hey sis.
Chanel. Hey Chanel. Hello, Tomas. The prayer meeting. We need one, huh, Tomas?
Oh, that'd be a good little prayer meeting. Arena.
I hope y'all show up in these comments too, because I'm holding community, but I believe that everybody can benefit. So I'm really hoping that y'all pour into me as much as we can provide some context and insight for y'all too.
For sure. 100% agree.
Okay, so let's get started, Chambers. So I am going to officially open us up, introduce, for people who don't know Steven, I'm going, hi, Retro Beauty. I'm going to introduce you to my followers. Steven's a big deal, y'all, if y'all don't know that. He's a pretty big deal. Don't let him fool you. I'm going to introduce him to my followers, and then I'll introduce myself, and then we're going to hop into this just heavy conversation, I think, and figure out how we can move through it together. So this is Mr. Steven Chambers. Those of you who be on the Insecure IG Lives with me on Tuesday afternoons, I say that I'm friends with about 98% of my exes. This is one of my exes that I am 98% in that 98%. If you don't make it to the 2%, it has to be a really cheers to that. You have to be it has to be some really, really tough stuff that happens for me not to remain friends with people. So Steven and I met years ago, 2014.
Yeah.
On
the spades table, I think. It was on the spades. We were partners.
It was. He was talking mad smack when we were doing spades. And
all meaningful Black relationships start on the spades table. I'm sorry.
That was the birth. No, it's cool. Wait, that was the birth of the relationship. We were together for a while. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to have this conversation with Steven is because from that relationship, this is why I believe, here go my plug for relationships. And I think that they're so important, platonic, romantic, familiar alike. I think that everything don't have to be forever for it to be meaningful. And so one of the things that I took away from that relationship was the birth for me of womanist theology, liberation theology, completely shifted the trajectory of my spirituality. And so I felt like this would be a perfect time to have a conversation because you were the person who introduced me to that. And in that space, there was so much, I think a lot of things came thereafter. So personally, I know Steven very well, but Steven is also, he has his master's from Vanderbilt. He's working on his doctorate in graduate education. Is that right, Steven? At Harvard. And so it'll be interesting to hear. I'm really curious to hear, what are his thoughts about after he, secures this Dr. Chambers at Harvard University and goes for, I know you're going to be a mover and shaker in the community. But for those of you who do not know Steven, he is definitely so wise, so funny. You'll probably be able to pick up on his humor, or you already have picked up on his humor. But he comes with a lot of wisdom, also licensed and ordained as well. And I'll let him talk a little bit more about that. But I just think that we're in for a treat. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. LaWanda Hill. I'm the owner of Hill Psychological and Consultation Services. I'm also a staff psychologist at Stanford University, and I enjoy curating spaces for us to come together and have some dialogue about things that truly matter. And I like to disrupt problematic narratives. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have a lot of problematic narratives that we're seeing play out. And so we're going to kind of do a little bit of that. So, Steven.
You got to talk about your specialty, though, too. What's your specialty?
One of my areas.
Counseling and, we got to give you the plug, too.
Sexual health, women's sexual health. Wellness for women of color, for people of color. I'm all about liberation. I'm all about us being the highest version of ourselves. I don't think you could do that unless you have permission to show up. And there's so many systems racism, classism, theology alike, and we're gonna really tap into that. So many systems that's intended to keep us suppressed and bogged down. And so I think that one of my missions, my purpose, I believe, I'm also licensed in ordained. I forgot that part.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of my areas is spirituality, and so I look at everything: physical health, mental health, sexual health, and emotional health. And so this is a
Mm-hmm.
perfect time to have all those married, I think, in a
Mm-hmm.
great conversation.
Yep.
So now that we got the intros and y'all know who y'all talking to, let's get it popping. So where you at, Stephen, with everything that's
Ooh.
happening in the world? Can we just name some of that stuff?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you, LaWanda, for inviting me to your platform and creating space for this. I am. My mom asked me this question today, and I think I am processing all that's happening in the world, and along with that processing, trying to find ways to channel my emotions into some like action,
Mm,
because the way I hold stress is that it physically shows up in my body. And like I'll lose sleep, my body will do certain things that I'm not in control of.
mm,
And hopefully you'll talk more about this, especially since this is like the work that you do. One of
mhm,
the books that you and I have talked about is The Body Keeps the Score,
mhm, mhm,
which was a book that transformed my life. And it showed me that if you don't identify the stress in your body, um, it will show up in ways that you're not acknowledging, and you might think that you have other things when the reality is the root of those other things is
mm,
stress that you're bottling up and that you're not acknowledging. And so for
mhm,
me, I'm acknowledging that I'm stressed out and that this is a time for grief for me,
mm.
a time for anger, a time for frustration and sadness, but it's also a time for action. And if I don't
Facts.
channel that stress into action, it's not going to be a good thing for me. So in terms of mental health, ways that I've dealt with that, like just historically, is like having a therapist.
Mhm.
And my therapist in Houston was bomb. Like Sandra Moore, I'm gonna shout you out. I don't know where you are right now,
Mhm.
but she's amazing.
Mhm.
And so that's helpful. Music is helpful. Meditation is helpful. Prayer obviously is very helpful for me. And we'll talk a lot more about that. But this, I guess, like to sum up what I'm saying in response to your question is, I'm trying to be physically productive with the energy that I have in my body. And
Mm.
for me, that's looking like advocacy. That's looking like activism.
Mhm.
Me and some friends and frat brothers have reached out to, it's election year in Alpha Phi Alpha, so we've reached out to some people
Mm.
running for president and trying to get them to create a Black Lives Matter platform
Mm.
under their presidency platform, because we're already like, there's no sense of being connected in these large organizations and not leveraging the power of the community that's already present. So
Mm.
starting
Mhm.
there first, and then trying to like pivot into new ways.
Mhm. Mhm. So I think I'm hearing you say like you have just a lot of reactions and it's like manifesting in your body. You're really trying to take that energy into and move it into something like that's productive. That doesn't make you feel stuck. I think I'm having a myriad of reactions, and it'll be interesting if y'all can weigh in the comments and kind of let us know how y'all are feeling, how y'all reacting, how you processing everything. I think I've moved through a number of different reactions because I feel this triple fold. So number one is like I am at Stanford and 90% of my student is people of color.
Mm-hmm.
90% of my students are people of color. And so I'm having to like hold my stuff, hold space for them. I also do a lot of work around diversity, equity, and inclusion there, hold
Mm-hmm.
space for that. And so it's just been like, I've been pissed. I've been angry. I've been
Mm-hmm.
sad. I've been agitated. I've been like not even hopeless because I think that's a threat to justice, but I have been just stunned and
Mm-hmm.
just stuck. Like I am consistently amazed at all the work that still needs to be done and how people still won't even acknowledge racism. Like,
Yeah.
like white people still won't acknowledge racism at this point in time. And so I just feel like I'm like taken aback. Like I'm
Yeah.
really just sitting in all of the emotions and realizing that like most of the work that I do is about people of color and moving us forward. So it's not
Mm-hmm.
like it's a new thing, but it just feels even heavier now. And then on top of a pandemic, when black and brown folks disproportionately being taken out, it just feels like it's trauma. Like Ebony
Mm-hmm.
said, one of my colleagues said, there's no post traumatic for us. it is just constant trauma, and you're constantly trying to navigate that and constantly try to be in that. And I very much so feel up in
Yeah.
that space.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I think, man, there's just so much in what you just said. One of my friends, was asking me why my focus on mentoring is like black male mentoring, and not in like a negative way.
Mm,
She was just pushing me and saying like, well, what if you took the same curriculum and used it for like white teenagers and white youth, and so they are exposed growing up to what it means to be like conscious of race,
mm-hmm,
and so when they become adults, they can acknowledge what you just said is like a lot of people don't know how to acknowledge racism. If you
mm-hmm,
learn the different ways that racism shows up in society, then you're able to acknowledge it. And so
mm-hmm,
if you teach people the layers to racism, it's not just about like setting stuff on fire or lynching people. Racism shows up in microaggressions in meetings, and it
mm-hmm,
shows up
mm-hmm,
in people questioning why you're in certain programs and academic institutions. So
mm-hmm,
like if you can identify the different ways and places that racism shows up, then you can start to say, oh, like I am low-key racist, like,
mm-hmm.
or I'm supporting
Taki.
racist mindsets
Mm-hmm,
because now I know what it means. But if we keep up these antiquated like ideas of what racism is and what it looks like, people are
mm-hmm.
going to keep playing the game that they don't know that they're operating in that racist mindset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because nobody escapes racial conditioning. And so the next thing I kind of like want to talk about and hear your thoughts on when you say, they ask you about the curriculum and using it to like mold white people or white boys, white young boys. This is the way I heard it, interpreted.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like what this pandemic has done for me, the pandemic on top of just the disrespect and the blatant disregard for black bodies, I have pivoted my conversations. Like, I don't know if that's where you are, but I'm in a space of like, I'm not explaining to you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking to like my white peers, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of them are here. A lot of them have tried to be supportive, but at this point, it's not my labor. It's
Yeah.
not my labor. No one escapes racial conditioning, period, no matter how you identify. And you have been conditioned in such a way, and I feel like for so long, the burden has felt on black women, black men,
Mm-hmm.
people of color to try to educate, white people about racism while also enduring racism and also like trying to move through the impact and the pain of racism. And it just kind of feels like if there's one blessing that has come from this, it's like my focus is pivoted. It's up to you to do the work. It's too much
Mm-hmm.
exposure. You're talking about years and years of conditioning, and I am no longer going to be a casualty to your process. I'm trying to
Mm.
get you to see me,
Yeah.
when there's so many black and brown folks that see me. So
Yeah.
as I look at posts, and you can think about the intended audience when people are writing these posts. It's like we're still trying to convince people. We're still trying to convince white people that this is a thing, that this
Yeah.
exists, that this is a problem, and we want you to do it better. And I feel like I'm just like unapologetically, the line has been drawn in the
Ooh.
sand. Like I'm not
Yeah.
either you get it or you don't. And so I'm curious, like where are you with that? Because that's been one of the impacts of all of this for me. In addition to all the emotions I named, I'm curious to know like how you feel about that and how you're processing it.
That is so real, and I'm seeing comments that are supporting everything you're saying too. I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
There are points where I'm just like in the middle of conversations, like actually I'm tired. I'm gonna just need you to like start googling some stuff
Read a
because
book.
yeah, I mean, on one end, I want people to like exercise their agency and be like, okay, I don't understand something. Let me do some research and figure it out. And
Mm-hmm.
then on another end, I think I know this is like really probably like contentious to say, but I think that there is not a responsibility for black people, but I personally feel like I am willing to educate white people when I feel like it. Don't
Mm-hmm.
expect me to when you're ready, but when I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it, I
Mm-hmm.
will offer some tools and some suggestions because I don't know how white people can engage with us if they don't understand what our needs are. And I
Mm-hmm.
know that our needs are captured in scholarship. I know our needs are captured in different ways. But sometimes just a simple conversation or being proximate and close to people is a way that people learn how to just like approach
Mm-hmm.
uh, black people. And I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay being that person when I feel like it. My issue is that people expect me to do it when they feel like it. and I'm not on your time, and I'm not on
Mhm.
your, like, whenever you're ready for that energy,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
it's not for you to tell me when I turn myself on. I can offer, but you're not going to demand or ask and expect me to respond in a way
Mhm.
and in the time that you need me to. So I hear
Mhm.
you. Like, I completely agree.
So because it's interesting, like what I'm hearing you say is like that is kind of like volunteering, but then there's also some groundwork that has been done, right?
Hmm.
There, for me, I'm at a place where there has to be some preliminary understanding. We're not coming to a conversation and I'm trying to convince you of anything. It's us coming to a conversation of trying to understand each other and each other's culture. For
Yeah.
instance, I went on a walk, a social distance walk with one of my colleagues who's Palestinian, and it is like the intrigue of each other's culture.
Hmm.
Okay, so talk to me about this, and or understanding Black culture, or understanding, Arab culture or Palestinian culture. There's a shared understanding that we both understand that our truths are our truths, and we
Yep.
come to the conversation trying to learn from each other, but not trying to convince you of, hey. And I think that's what needs to pivot. I'm
Yeah.
all about being in community, and I'm all about us learning from each other because I do think that the richness of the culture, we are all blessed by it. But if we have to start the conversation with, let me convince you of all the ways in which you're problematic and the way you've been racially conditioned and the way in which you're racist, then that's where I'm going to have to self-select out. And then I'm
That's
going to
so
give you some
real.
books. You can go read the books and then we can revisit this
Yeah.
conversation, but
Yeah.
not before that.
I definitely, every, like, the thing that you just said that stuck out to me the most is people should want to get close to you for relationship and for
Yes.
community,
Yes.
not for education. And I think that's the point. Like, if you learn that, if you just have the interest in my humanity, then you will learn how to approach me in my blackness. Like,
Mm,
it won't need to be a conversation
mm,
about education. You will
mm,
be learning Stephen and LaWanda in their
mm-hmm.
blackness as you're becoming a part of, like, the community in the relationship, which is also why I think it's so important that, like, all the, and this is like a slight tangent, like, all of these, like, like
Go for it.
Hollywood and, like, closing us out from allowing Black directors to tell stories where there are layers to Black people is so important,
Mm.
because the more you see, like, that we're more than, like, Medea, yeah, that's a shot, more than Medea, or, like, the toxic images that are present
Yeah.
in mainstream media, and people start to see, like, oh, this isn't just a Black film, this is a
Mm,
film about humanity and real issues that Black people are in, and this
mm-hmm.
is how Black people engage in the world. We need
Mm-hmm.
more of that. And
Mm-hmm.
if we're talking about, like, a systemic approach to getting, like, white people to understand Blackness, start opening up some doors for us to express and to be who we are. Like, we are gifted and talented people, but we
Mm-hmm.
have, like, these parameters where
Restricted.
society tries to box us
Mm-hmm.
into only one narrative, and
Mm-hmm.
that's in my opinion a big part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. And I love a cue for a narrative. These narratives, right? We get boxed into these narratives and we begin to perform them, right? We begin to
Mm-hmm.
kind of internalize them. And one of the narratives that I think that has kind of helped me in like navigating just being free, period, is like liberation. Like
Mm-hmm.
liberation, theology, what that narrative gives me. And so one of the significant like pivotal moments um in my relationship with Steven. I think, well, there were several pivotal moments. I ain't gonna reduce you to like two or three.
Is this a
So
Jay-Z Beyonce moment? I'm gonna put out a 444 after this
okay. And so
conversation,
I dropped lemonade and I'll
because
highlight a
this is
few.
starting to
So
feel like lemonade. But go ahead with your little yellow dress on. Go ahead. No, I'm just
I can't stand you. So one of the moments that was really pivotal. So you like, so think about it. You fight racism, right? You are in oppression. You moving through the world, and you are being kind of socialized. Like I said, nobody escapes socialization. Nobody escapes racial conditioning. And I remember feeling like, well, this is just it. This is just the suffering that we have to do.
mm-hmm.
As Black people, this is just the rites of passage. This is what we got to pick up our cross and we got to take it forward. This is what Jesus has called me to do. And you said something to the extent of like, I don't think that the gospel should be reduced to suffering or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, this was also the introduction of womanist theology, because I remember you saying like, I'm not interested in a subordinate. I'm interested in a partner. And so these
Mm-hmm.
were two completely different narratives that completely shook my worldview in terms of how I'm going to navigate and move through this world. And so here's why I feel like spirituality plays a role in the relationship, because people may not see a relationship between race, spirituality, and mental health. but I think that they are so intimately connected and they
Oh
all
yeah.
inform each other. And so I want to talk about, how we're experiencing this, how we're moving through the world, and this ideal of liberation theology as number one, an approach to life, and number two, a coping mechanism in a way in which
Mhm.
we kind of engage our spirituality in action, because that's what it
Yeah.
is about to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That I think I'm gonna talk just a little bit on black liberation theology. Because I think that a part of, and this is like for folks that are listening, if you're like a part of the Christian tradition, you'll probably resonate with this a little more and relate to this a little more. If not, I mean, just come along for the ride. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, like, and if you don't know, like coming into Christianity as black folk, we took on what they consider the white man's Christianity and basically made it our own, informed by our ancestral religions, informed by just natural wisdom, and
Mm-hmm.
informed by just interpretations of how black people are situated in theology and in the Bible in particular. So like black people really related to the Hebrew people. Black people really related to the least of these or the oppressed that Jesus sided with. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that, like taking bits and pieces of what Master gave us, was how we created, what they call the invisible institution, where we create our own version of Christianity. And that has become what is now the Black Church, capital B, capital C, and
Mm-hmm.
and basically how we take on faith as a way to liberate ourselves. So we now see faith as like, if I believe that God is inside of me and that I'm worth being inside of by the divine, then
Mm-hmm.
I am worth loving, then I am valuable, then I am worth existing. And so if we can start to feel like, oh, Jesus was talking about me, or
Mm-hmm.
in the Bible, or even just God saying like, I am a part of who you are, that is the self-love that I think black people need to exercise more of,
Mm-hmm.
identifying that there is divinity inside of us and humanity inside of us. And
Mm-hmm.
that divinity and humanity has to be loved. Like if we don't love ourselves, we're not going to fight for ourselves. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to allow people to create narratives for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And different people need different ways to, you know, show that they are valuing themselves. I always think about like why black people are so flashy. And of course that's like a generalization, but like if you think about like black people always have to have on like our Sunday best when we go to church, or
Mm-hmm.
like the newest shoes, or like the nicest cars. And a lot of critique is like, oh, we're frivolous. And on the economic standpoint, it's like, oh, you're just wasting money. But what if
Mm-hmm.
black people are actually using material things as the only way that they can attach value to who they are? Like if I
Mm-hmm.
look good, then I'm worth something. If I
Mm-hmm.
drive a nice car, then I'm valuable. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people start. Like you might not have the books, you might not have the
Mm-hmm.
scholarship, but you have some material things. So if that's your starting place, I think those of us who do have the books and the scholarship, pushing
Mm-hmm.
people to say yes, and like yes, it's
Right.
cool. Like materialism, I understand that's how you're adding value to your humanity, but let's take it a step further and think about the fact that God is inside of us, and we
Mm-hmm.
don't really need anything else. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't need a nice car. I don't
Mm-hmm.
need a nice house. I don't even need you to like talk about my resume if the cops kill me, because that's not where my value is.
Right,
Honestly,
right,
like
right,
my
right.
value is in my existence because God is inside of me, and my humanity plus my divinity is all the value that I need.
Mm-hmm. And I don't need you to see me. Like
Exactly.
I think that a lot of, you can kind of tell that a lot of people are being, I don't know, call to action to like reach out to your black colleagues, your brown colleagues, let them know that they see you. And I feel like thank you. And also, I don't need you to see me. God
Mm,
sees me.
mm,
I understand my value. I know who I am. I'm not moving in the world for you to be able to like, please see me, please see me, please see me, because
mm,
people who truly want to see me will. And I think that that's the beauty for me of gathering in community, because I don't have to scream for another black person or
mm,
another brown person to be able to see me. We just do. And I think that narrative of racism that kind of creates this hierarchy and this like subservient or inferiority will make you internalize this idea that I need to be respectable politics. I need to be educated. Let me get degreed up. I need to not be flashy, or I need to say the right things, or I need to have the right pronunciation or the right words. Because if I do all these things, then maybe you will see me.
Yeah.
What liberation theology did for me is that I don't need you to see me. That's great
Yeah.
if you do, win for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
But even if you don't, like the starting point, I guess, of liberation theology is that, like, this divine feels I am so valuable and so worthy, right? That it lives in me, and I am seeing, and the rest of anything else is just like a plus. Anything else is a plus, but I'm no longer using, whiteness as the marker to
Yeah.
be seen, to be able to get approval, to be able to see validated. Because it's like this idea of, like Dr. Nikki says, internalized anti-blackness. Because everybody else is anti-black, I've internalized this anti-blackness. But
Yeah.
with liberation, for me, theology was like, oh, so I'm seen?
Yeah.
Like that's enough. It's not about performance. It's not
Yeah.
about what I can do. It's not about earning. It's about being seen. Like, that's the starting point.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. I so agree with that. A big thing that I heard you say is that I don't need you to see me for my value. Like, I might the way I might take what you said and apply it to my thinking could be, this is just my thinking. I don't need you to see me for my value. I agree with that. I do need you to see me so that you don't make the mistakes that I see a lot of white people making in the world, and not acknowledging the humanity and the value that Black people have in just existing. And that's not necessarily like something I need you to do for me, but that's like, I need you to see me so that I don't have to like pop off on you. Like, I need you to see, like, if you can just see me like coming into this meeting and acknowledging my presence,
Yeah.
then that's one less thing I have to think about.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of people's arguments for like going to HBCUs or like being in like very like communities that are just like all Black communities. Because when I was at Hampton, I did not think about being Black in the sense of like a defense mechanism. It was like,
Facts.
I am Black,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm also a marketing major. Like, I'm
Yeah.
more focused about like going to the business school, going
Right.
to tenant, like going to the student center, like going to parties, and just existing and enjoying college life. I didn't have to think about my identity as a Black person. And I think that if people can see us, and we don't, to the point where we don't have to like have our defenses up all the time about like, no, I'm worth something because I'm Black, like every moment, and we can just breathe and like do life, then I think that's what I need for you though. But to your point, not for me. Like, that does not add value for me. That just helps me like maneuver the world with a little less stress and with like a little less distraction. Because I'm just like amazed at how like Black people such as yourself like can come into the world and like compete in a PhD, compete as a doctor at Stanford, and knowing that you did all that while defending yourself from kindergarten to like postgraduate. Like, not only are you succeeding at a certain level, like a high standard, but you're doing that in the midst of all this other stuff that you have to deal with on your way to the top. And that is to me, like, if we don't see the value in that, like, that is amazing. That there are people and cohort mates of mine, like in my program, I'm like, you are like a unicorn, because like you're able to do all that, and in the midst of it, it's just, there's just so much that we compete with as Black people. We have to celebrate each other. So
we do. And I think, like, I went to Southern. Shout out to SUBR. It's some Southernites in here, and I love that. Like, I think being at a HBCU was just that. I was just LaWanda, who was majoring in psychology. Period. There was a celebration of Blackness, right? There was a understanding of, hey, these are some of the narratives that you may have internalized out there, but we're going to disrupt some of these narratives now. So when you move and shape, be prepared for them, because if it's one thing, y'all at least talk about SU, it's one thing people like to do. They like to skew the truth. And I
Yeah.
think being in that space like really reminded me of the number one, the importance of gathering, the importance of being in community, and starting at that starting point. I think so many of us don't start at that starting point, or if we do, start at that point of celebration, knowing that we're valued by the divine, that we're carrying the divine. Then we begin to internalize maybe some anti-blackness, maybe some racism, some really, which we're going to talk a little bit about white evangelical Christianity and the way in which that takes us away from liberation and takes us on a different path, because that's a whole different set of scripts. I think starting there was just so pivotal. And I think right now we're in a moment where I think our energy needs to be focused on, or a piece of our energy on gathering and feeling like we're valuable, and knowing that, like we said, despite everything that we're facing, we still innately have this
Mm-hmm.
power to move and shake, be organized, be systematic, and start and pivot. Because as I was talking about this with Dr. Coleman, shout out to Dr. Coleman, she was my advisor in grad school. I was like, I'm really just like, I can't imagine a life beyond this moment of unapologetically just living in my truth.
Mm.
Like, I cannot go back to a space where it's like, let me make you feel better.
Oh, I see.
Let me tell you how you're hurting me. Let me tell you all the ways in which you've been racially conditioned. Let me kind of like tiptoe. I can't go back to that place, because we
Mm-hmm.
know that that place doesn't work, and it begins to impact your mental health. Because like you said, I'm facing everything and I still have to show up for work. I'm still a business
Mm-hmm.
owner.
Yeah.
I'm still a daughter. I'm still in friendship with people. I'm still holding people's truths. And so I think we owe it to ourselves to be true to ourselves and
Yeah.
show up and be unapologetically black, because that's the only way the culture pivots. If we keep
Yeah.
performing these narratives and these scripts to make people feel comfortable, you should feel uncomfortable. Then I think that we're going to continue to be in this space. But what I'm appreciating about this moment is just that it has caused a pivot that I can't really see a life prior to. Like, I'm just
Mm.
amazed that I wasn't operating and having these conversations in these spaces prior to all this happening. And I
Yeah.
know that that's true for a lot of people. What would happen if everybody that's on this chat, or everybody who's logged in on Facebook, was just like, yeah, let's just take off this mask and let's just show up and
Yeah.
continue to be unapologetically us and use spirituality as a mechanism to cope and move in that way? I think we would continue to see some progress.
Yeah, I agree. And I see some questions about what you said. And I'm going to
Okay.
let you, as the psychologist, speak to trauma a little more than me. But I will add one thing, because I think as we're dealing with the trauma that we're experiencing now, and I'm going to reiterate this, it's important for us to like come up with some practices for ourselves where
Mm.
we can acknowledge our self-love and
Mm.
our self-love in blackness.
Period.
And I'm saying that again because in order for us to push through this moment and to envision a future and like have some hope, we're going to have some stamina. And in order for us to have
Mm.
stamina,
That's
we're going
good.
to have a reason why we keep pushing. And
Mm.
if our reason why does not start with self-love, then we're not going to be able to continue to push, because we're going to lose
Mhm.
sight of why we're pushing if we
Mhm.
don't start with the self-love. And so
Mhm.
if that means like having a daily affirmation on your mirror that says I am black and beautiful every morning, then you got to do
Mhm.
that. If that means that like you need to have a friend that reminds you when you start to drift, that like let's not forget that you come from kings and queens. Like, let's
Mhm.
not forget that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
one of the best things, I was talking to my family today, like the fact that my immediate ancestors, came across the ocean in the Middle Passage and survived, and I come from those people, like
Mm.
that means I'm resilient. Like that means I got that
Right.
in my DNA. Like it's
Right. Right.
like it's there. So I just need to remind myself and surface the stuff that's already in me, so that I can like continue to find value in being a protester or like somebody who pushes the envelope. I can
Mhm.
continue to fight for what I know is right
Mhm.
about like respecting me and my people, because
Mhm.
I know what I'm worth.
Mhm.
And regardless,
Mhm.
and the hard part, and you talked about this earlier, the hard part is you turn on the TV, you turn on you like listen to certain music, you have certain people, even in scholarship, writing about you, especially in education, which is like the field that I'm also in. We're all, I don't know how many times I see a stat about like black boys, black girls are the lowest in achievement. But my question is always like, achieving what? Like whose
Right.
standard are we?
Right. That's
Who's
good.
like, of course, we'll continue to be at the bottom if the achievement standard is tailored around white dominant like culture. So,
Right,
of
right.
course, so if I'm doing well on tests or standardized tests, good job. Like, I have mastered the white dominant code. However, Black people are successful beyond those very boxed white dominant codes. And
Period.
we can acknowledge like we have value beyond what the world is telling us is valuable, then I think that's how we really start to like have some energy, some stamina, and some hope to move beyond moments like this. Because right now, when people talk about they're hopeless, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
And I know that they need something in order to have some hope.
Right.
And
Too.
and I think we can talk about this a little maybe in the next 15 minutes. But but like I think hope is also rooted in faith. So like it's
Yeah,
hard
yeah,
to
yeah,
have hope if you don't have faith.
yeah, yeah.
And
That's
so
good.
the question is like what do you have faith in? Like do you
Mm,
have faith in God? Do you have faith in yourself? All of the above? Do you have faith in community? And
mm-hmm,
so it's not really a question of like why do I feel hopeless? It's like how do I identify where I have my faith? Like where does
mm-hmm,
my faith lie? For
mm-hmm,
me, it's in God. It's in like
mm-hmm,
community, people like you, people like
mm-hmm,
my friends. That's where my faith lies.
mm-hmm,
You were gonna
mm-hmm.
say something.
No, it was so good. I don't even know what to react to. First, I was thinking, like, I tend to, for a second, because I do want to get into this thing about, like, faith and what that looks like, because I can understand why people could get to hopelessness if they've internalized a narrative of what faith should look like. If
Mm.
you've internalized this narrative of passivity, if you
Mm.
internalize this narrative of turn the other cheek all the time, if you've
Mm.
internalized this narrative that the suffering servant has to endure this, I can
Yeah.
see how you could be hopeless. And so
Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
disrupt a little bit of that in a moment.
Yeah.
You know what? I ain't preached in a while. And
Come
so
on.
I'm really feeling like, this might be his moment where I really want to,
Come on
do a
in.
little
Come on in.
preaching and then open up the doors of the church. But I think in terms of like practices, you're right. I really like this point about there's something that we do have to do to attend to ourselves. I definitely think that's therapy, y'all. I definitely
Mm-hmm.
think that's community. I definitely think that's affirmations. I definitely think that that's music. I think that that's art. I think that that's
Mm.
moving your body.
Yes,
I think that
music.
there's so many things that I personally believe God has given us that we can engage all the time. And so this is mental health awareness month. And so I've been doing a series of different things of like, okay, let's talk about mental health. We know
Mm-hmm.
therapy works. Great. Let's sign up for a therapist. We
Yep.
also know art works. I've interviewed artists. We also know that, walking and engaging your body works. There's so many things that we're equipped with to be able to restore because I only believe that we're resilient if we have adequate recovery. Let's
Yeah.
disrupt this narrative that we are so strong and we can endure
Yeah. That's
anything
good.
without pausing. No, I'm
That's good.
tired and I'm pausing.
That's good.
Period. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna pause for however long I need to pause because I don't have to be the strong Black woman
Yeah.
all the time. I don't have to be the stoic Black woman who's unimpacted. I'm pissed, and y'all gonna know I'm pissed, and I'm gonna take me a break. Period. So I
Yeah.
think that there's so many different things that we can do to pause, and one of those to like recover, right? To
Yeah.
be able to get that stamina because we in for a fight. Like, I don't think that these systems go down without a fight. And so how do we engage these different parts of ourselves so that we can adequately recover? And I think spirituality is one for me.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
find hope in womanism. I find hope in a theology of liberation because
Yep.
I firmly believe, and here's where we can talk about these different narratives, that in this gospel of peace and love that I think Jesus definitely stood for, we so conveniently forget to talk about justice, right?
Mm.
We so conveniently forget to talk about all the ways in which I think, we need to challenge these narratives that kind of like make us believe that we are less than. And so
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
me, if I know that I am divine, part of the divine, that God is with me, that I buy into womanism, that I believe that Jesus is not this pale white man with blue eyes, with pale
Mm-hmm.
hair, that he is a brown man,
Mm-hmm.
who it was from in this Middle Eastern pigmented skin.
Mm-hmm.
I said I wasn't going to, but he said he had hair like wool. Okay.
Right.
So that means you look like me, right? That means you look
Right.
like me and you understand me. And so where is the justice? So part of my faith, and here's where I have an issue, is part of fighting injustices.
Yeah. Yeah.
Part of my faith is disrupting problematic narratives instead of just like taking them on and internalizing them like, okay, so we need to just be by any means necessary. That's my faith.
Mm-hmm.
By any
Mm-hmm.
means necessary. And so because I know that this is problematic, this gives me energy. Like my faith fuels me because I know that there is a force, that God is behind me, pushing me to be able to kind of disrupt these narratives and demand justice and also be free. Because I don't want
Yeah.
to spend my life just demanding justice that I'm not liberated and just being. And so I want to talk sometime about like the distinction in your opinion, because there is this central white evangelical Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's liberation theology.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the distinctions for you in the ways in which you live it out? The distinctions
Mm.
first, and then how you live it out differently.
I'm gonna take that question and kind of like, cause you said a lot, and it was a lot of, and it was a lot of good stuff, and I don't want to like move too far from that because I think people need to hear some of that, especially like the rest and recovery, and
Mm,
like being in this quarantine like season. It's just very interesting. Not interesting. It's just the fact that we're in this quarantine season where we're essentially cut off from all the things that might, or a lot of the things that might be a source of rest and recovery. I'm
mm.
speaking specifically about the gym for myself as one
Same.
as one place to go for like outlets, and having to deal with trauma of seeing what's happening in this world.
Mm,
You do need more than like your spiritual food. You also
mhm,
need to find and be strategic about ways that you can like heal and help yourself, your body, your emotions, your mind, in
mhm,
addition to the spirit, so that you can persist. That is like so important, and like has to be a part of this conversation. And I think like
mhm,
one of the things that you shared about white evangelicalism, and or even just like um the dissension, the difference between black theology. I think the biggest thing for me is um the black theology is about how, what's the most concise one? I think black theology is about action, and it's
mm,
about love.
mm,
So those two
mm,
things like are hand in hand. Frederick Douglass is like has one of my favorite quotes, and he says, "I prayed for 20 years, but
mm,
received no answer until I prayed with my legs."
mm.
And that quote to me is like, one, prayer. Let me just set this straight because I hate when people like, I'm tired of all this praying and talking. We need some action. I'm like, prayer is action. Like, if you pray
Right,
the way you're supposed to pray, like, prayer is
right.
action because it
Mhm,
activates your faith. And your
mhm,
faith is what pushes you to have hope. And your hope is what helps you persist through
mm,
through protest. So,
mm,
prayer, first of all, is action.
mhm.
Secondly, like, you can also turn prayer into physical action, which is
Yeah.
like, yes, I'm praying about something or I'm praying with people on something, but
Mhm,
I also need to like bring my prayers alive by doing something that will
mm,
help the divine bring what I'm praying about to life. And so
mhm,
like there's action, there's physical
mhm,
action, and then there's like the spiritual action of like prayer. And so I think one thing that black theology does that is not very explicit, in my opinion, in white evangelical spaces is telling black people in particular that you have the right and you are valued enough to act in your prayer life, like to
mhm,
actionably pray and to like actively like live your prayers. And
mm,
that is something that I think we need to hold on to. Like, it,
mhm.
our ancestors pushed through being enslaved because they knew they were not slaves. You know what I'm
Yeah, that's
saying? Like,
good. That's
like
good.
I'm not like my
That's
ancestors
good.
were not slaves. They were
Mhm.
enslaved.
Right.
Like they were like regal people. They were people. They had whole lives and communities before they came to this
Mm,
country.
mhm,
So don't reduce me to slavery and say that my ancestors are slaves.
mhm,
And like if we can disrupt those narratives, to your point, like on
mm.
all sides, like in the education sector, in like the
Yeah,
media sector, all of
yeah,
that, let
yeah.
people know like actually like you're more than what you've been taught.
Mhm,
And when we talk about how Christianity came to black folk through through slavery, none of that was taught. Like it was illegal for
mm,
slaves to even read.
mhm,
Now why
mhm,
would that be the case? Like
mhm,
if there's not knowledge that can wake you up in your head and in your
mm,
spirit, then why would that be a threat to anybody in
mhm,
power?
mhm,
So
mhm.
look, I mean like there's so much here. Like I feel like I'm like trying to hold myself down right now from hopping out this chair because there's so much here.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like you tell me where you want to go with this, but I think you've said a lot, and I think do we have like? Do you want to talk to people in the? I don't know. This is your
Yeah, if
show. You
you
do your
take a
thing.
look at, no, this is our show. So take a look at the comments. I want to, and let me know if there's anything that hop out that you want to attend to, or specific points or questions people want us to address. There's a couple things that you said a lot too that I really appreciated. And one of the things that when I was at Higher D back in the Gap, Pastor Jay used to say all the time, I'm never going to pray a prayer that I'm not willing to be part of the answer to. And I think that that has always stuck with me. I'm not going to
Mm.
pray about injustice if I'm not willing to be a part of disrupting
Well, I like
narratives and
that. I
systems.
like that.
I'm not going to pray about, Lord, please meet the need of my brothers and sisters who's lost their jobs and struggling if I'm not willing to be a part of that answer. And sometimes that may be giving up some of my privilege. And
Mm.
sometimes that may be giving up some of my
Ugh.
power. But if you're not willing to be a part of that answer, then don't pray the prayer because you don't really mean it, right? If
That
you're
is
a
so
vessel,
good. You
if
need to
you're a
post that
conduit,
somewhere. That's good. No,
I'm gonna
that's
get it on
good.
a shirt. I'm gonna get it on a
Because there's a
shirt.
lot of people out here praying that are not willing to be a part of the answer to their prayer.
Right.
And
Where are you? Are you the vessel? Are you the
yeah,
vessel to be used to be able to disrupt these systems that need to be disrupted? And I think for me, the issue that I have sometimes with evangelical Christianity that leaves this piece out is that this ain't about kumbaya all the time. Jesus is flipping tables, okay?
hmm,
He's like drop them rocks. Whoever is
yeah,
without sin, I want you to cast that first stone, which is not popular, right? Which was
yeah,
not, the thing that people, the answer that people were looking for. It was about, being a part of faith is radical to me.
yeah.
And so being a part of that answer, you have to be willing to be a part of that answer. So I definitely want to, say that and address that. And the action piece of like, what are we doing? Like, how are we walking this out every day?
Hmm.
How are we showing up? And everybody's action in their faith looks different.
Yep,
It could be in education systems. It could be taking up spaces. It could be, if you have a platform, I am all about interrupting problematic narratives at Stanford. It's like, no, we're not at risk because we're inherently at risk. We're at risk because these systems make us at risk.
exactly,
That's my action. That's my
exactly.
faith in action every day. And
And
so
your language of at risk is like also problematic. Like all of it.
all of it together. And so
Yeah.
it's like, how do we, how do we use these moments in time right now to be able to, number one, I feel like to summarize where we are or what we've talked about is to number one, believe that we're valuable, right?
Hmm.
Everybody's at different places. Believe that we're valuable, period.
Yep.
We're valuable because we're inherent, because of our blackness. We're not monolithic. We
Hmm.
are so dynamic, and we bring so much to the world. Like other cultures bring so much to the world, and let's start there. Not in comparison to, or I'm only valuable if I can get you to see me. We are there, right? See
Hmm.
beyond this anti-blackness if there's any anti-blackness. Believe that. Show up, rest and recover along the way, and
Hmm.
attend to our mental health because I firmly believe that only a healthy body can carry out the task assigned to it. I believe we all are part of this thing called moving things forward. And if I'm doing like 80% of the work and 20% of people chilling, then of course I'm gonna be torn down because
Yep.
people aren't like carrying their weight. And so how
Yep.
do we, rest, recover in all these different ways? Having therapists because we're dealing with some trauma, right? We're
Yep.
dealing with, the onset of racial trauma. There's no getting out of it. We're dealing with pain. We're dealing with our own personal life. That's just outside of racism,
Hmm.
right? We ain't even talked about outside of racism. Rest and recover, and then what are we hoping in? And for me there is a hope, there's a bigger hope that I believe that I am valuable. I believe that God sees me as valuable. So I'm not accepting any narrative that says otherwise.
Yep.
I'm not accepting any narrative that oppresses or silences me, and I'm not accepting any narrative that tells me that I need to bend and shape and form into this box to make you comfortable. And
Hmm.
so using that and feeling that action, using that and transforming it into action looks very different for different people. But I definitely think we're at a pivotal moment where if we can draw into that, we would see some radical change.
I agree. Especially on the collective piece. We can't depend on a select few to do all of the work. Uh,
Mm-mm.
and we can't expect black people to do all the work.
Right.
Um, we've done enough work for this country, in my opinion.
For free.
And a lot of why these institutions are even in place is because we gave you the free blood, sweat, and tears to allow them to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have the right to take a break. And and with that, we also have a responsibility to push other people,
Yeah,
particularly
that's
white
good.
people and people in privilege, to start
Yes.
taking up some responsibility
Mhm.
and doing this work. And I think
Mhm.
I also heard you say something about like how do we reject like those narratives that come our way. And this might also help some people with self-care in this season,
Mm.
like monitoring the amount of stuff that we take in and the type of stuff that we take in. Like I intentionally have not watched the news today because I'm like I'm overwhelmed of
Right.
I don't I mean I support the protest. I support the movement, but I
Mhm.
just can't see like I honestly had never finished watching the clip of George Floyd because
I
I'm
ain't
like,
watched.
I don't need to see that. Like
That's trauma.
I'm still holding on to trauma from like 3 years ago, watching like all these other
Mm. Mhm.
police brutality clips. Like I can't keep taking all this in. I'm overwhelmed. And so
Mhm.
like a part of maintaining our health is like monitoring what we take in.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And like we have 2 minutes, so I don't want to like keep rambling. So I'm gonna let you go ahead and wrap us up. But I'm gonna say this
Well,
before,
okay.
just real quick. I
Okay.
want to remind people to breathe because one thing that happens, I think, when we are in the midst of trauma and when we are like stressed out, is we forget to breathe. Like literally sitting and taking a deep internal breath, like in your nose,
Mm.
out your mouth, feel it in your diaphragm, all of that. But like spend time breathing. And
Mhm.
I was starting to realize that I was having really shallow,
Mm.
quick breaths
Mhm.
every day this week, and I'm like, why is my heart racing so fast? And I'm like,
Mhm.
after I did 2 deep breaths, I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm not breathing. Like I'm not breathing.
We have more time because I forgot we started at like 5:05, so you have more time, so you don't
Okay.
have to like wrap that up. But and then it'll give me a countdown, and I'll let you know. I think that breath is good, and I did a 14-day fast with Upper Room. Breath lets us know that we're alive, and to me, it reminds us that
Mm.
God is within us.
Yeah,
So when
yeah,
I feel like I'm overwhelmed, or if I feel like somebody tried it again, because white people love to try it, I breathe, and then I will remind myself, okay, God's with me.
yeah,
Okay, God, you're with me. Let me really recenter myself because the fact that I am breathing, like that is so important and that is so pivotal and that's so powerful if we pause to say, okay, God is with me. I'm taking this breath in, I'm taking it out, and let me just recenter myself. How do I want to respond in this moment? Do I want to self-select out? Because I don't have
mm.
to. Like I don't have
Yeah.
to engage in a conversation. And it's okay to have joy right now. I think
Mm-hmm.
that, I do a lot of different, not a lot, but a few platforms with Dr. Nikki. I do it with Josie, where we do a debrief of Insecure. It's okay to take a break and go
Yeah,
watch it. I'm coming back to the fight. I'm committed to it.
yeah.
So my break doesn't mean abandonment. It
Without
means
without the guilt of taking the break.
without the
Yeah.
guilt. Like I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to see anything. I don't want to take anything in. I know a lot of people are becoming more aware, but this has been my experience for 33 years. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have found a way to jump in and jump out. And so I think it's important for us to breathe. I think it's also important for us to take breaks and be joyful. Joyful
Yeah.
is radical and it's resistant to me. And
Yeah, it is.
so how do we engage in pleasure in ways in which we can kind of reclaim and kind of take a break from some of this trauma? Plug for sexual health, sexual
Yeah.
pleasure. We're entitled to that, and we don't have to always feel like we're taking this in constantly. When we get overwhelmed, the body keeps the count, and when we get overwhelmed, that's our body's way of saying, hey, you may want to take a break from this because this is too much right now.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. You, you on it.
Queen B said white supremacy will try and convince you that you can't break. I love, yeah. Also, this grind culture, we got to
I
be
was just about to
excellent.
say that. Because you sit up here trying to be the model, like the model black person in these mostly
No,
white spaces. Like I
no.
have to be 100 all the time, every day. If I
Mm-mm.
don't, then I'm not valuable. And
Mm-hmm.
then you're burned out, and then they just find a new token to replace you with, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm on the
Oh,
sidelines now.
okay.
So like,
Right,
not
right.
having that guilt, like you know what, I don't have to be excellent
Mm-hmm.
24/7. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be mediocre today because that's how much energy I have and I'm still valuable and I'm still intelligent and I'm still
Mm-hmm.
worth all the accolades that might come my way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if I was mediocre, I still would be valuable. Period.
Exactly.
I don't
Exactly.
have to perform, and I really, really just like I love to empower and be a vessel of liberation. Like he came that we may have life abundantly, not a life of performance. not a
Mm.
life of feeling less than, not a life of being burned out, not a life of, fighting all the time, a life abundantly. And sometimes that life, if I show up, I may give you 150 today because
Yep.
I'm restored. And then sometimes, I don't know, because I've watched them murder Trayvon and get away with it. I've watched them murder Tatiana and get away with it. Maybe I only got 20% today. And that narrative that pops in that says, I need to be on, I need to like disrupt that. That is
Yep.
not your narrative. And I think we need permission to just be able to say, I'm not okay. And
Facts.
nobody else would be okay. And that's
Facts.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. Facts.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we're on the countdown of 1 minute and 45 seconds. Steven, what you want to lead the people with? Like, what do you want to offer as a takeaway?
I'm gonna keep saying this over and over again. We have to be intentional about how we love ourselves as Black people. We have to remind ourselves that we're worthy of love and that we are valuable simply for existing. Um, and really just like treating our individual, but also our collective, like we are part divine and part human. Like if you know that God
Mm,
is inside you, people talk
mm,
about like Jesus flipping tables in the temple. What
mm-hmm.
if we envision ourselves as the temple? And so
Mm,
anytime anybody disrupts that temple, we are given the permission to pop off. Because
mm,
if somebody approaches my temple in a malicious, in a violent way, I'm not
mm-hmm,
going to just sit there. I'm going to
mm-hmm,
do as Jesus did in the book of Matthew and
mm-hmm,
Mark and flip a
mm-hmm,
table
mm-hmm.
because I am part divine and part human, and you're not going to disrespect that.
And if you have any narrative, I would offer if you have any narrative that does not belong to me, that I am less than, that I have to be excellent, that I have to be on, that I have to perform, that I need to be subservient, that I need to be suppressed, that I need to be meek and docile and take you consistently
Mm,
being, like heinous toward me, because I understand that that is not true and not fact, I'm going to disrupt that. And I'm
yep.
going to resist that. And that resistance to me is going to be liberation. And
Yeah.
so I really
And
hope
don't let
y'all.
people say that's violent. Yeah.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not violent, period. Ain't even no explanation. It's just not violent, period.
Thank you.